Let's re-rank all three Fear Street movies once again. Welcome back to the Asylum Beyond the Dead, where we do movie reviews, rankings, art, and music videos on this channel. And today, we are going to be re-ranking all three Fear Street movies. Now, I've already done a ranking like this before, and I did it again, but I'm just not happy with the second attempt ranking it again. And looking back, I know I can do better since I'm getting a lot better with my edits. So, I'm going to re-rank all three films. There's only three films in the franchise, so if you're interested, kick back and relax and enjoy the re-ranking of all three Fear Street movies. Spoiler alert, the ranking hasn't changed, it's just been more updated and improved, and with better editing skills. Coming in at number 3 is Fear Street Part 3, 1666. Now this movie, it's not a bad film. That's why I'm not saying that it is putting it at my number 3 spot. It just doesn't do anything for me. The explanation on why what happened with the curse of Seraphir and all that was a pretty piss poor explanation. All they give you is that she's making out with this individual and that gets her killed and that gets her executed pretty much. And that was a pretty weak explanation on why she died. That might have been the case around 1666 years back, I'm not sure, but you got so many writers in the film, they could have done a way better explanation than what they gave us on screen. I thought the acting was pretty good. It really does sound like people back in 1666, the way they interacted with each other, the way they talk, the way they dressed. And I do think the score of this movie was really good, and I do think the cinematography was great. I love the mall scene sequences at the end of the movie. That is by far the best part for me. I really did enjoy that sequence. All of the killers attacking each other. You got Nightwing, Skull Mask, Grifter, and Billy Barker, and Ruby Lane. And I think that's it. But yeah, this movie is a pretty good movie with a lot of flaws, and it just comes down to the explanation of why, the curse of Seraphir lives on from 1666 to 1994, and basically the explanation on why she was executed is a pretty terrible, piss poor, lazy explanation. Again, making out with an individual gets you executed. Come on now. They should have done a lot better than that, and I think the writers are aware of that. And with that, this movie doesn't do anything for me aside from the sequences in the mall at the end of the movie when they're all fighting. The whole movie, it's a good movie, but it's not a movie that I would constantly watch, unlike the other two movies. So that is why Fear Street Part 3, 1666 is at my number 3 spot. At number 2 is Fear Street Part 2, 1978. I really do love and enjoy this movie. If you haven't know already, I love summer camp slasher movies, and you will be pretty shocked that it's not at my number 1 spot. I love the camp atmosphere that this film has. The cinematography is great, especially in the nighttime sequences. I love the kills in this movie. I even love the look of the slasher villain they went, where he has like a potato sack on him, and this look is really cool. And pretty much the whole look, I love the fact that it's a carbon copy of the Part 2 Jason from Friday the 13th Part 2. Him wearing the cloth mask, and they both wield an axe type weapon, and that was a really fun touch, not only because this is the second film within Fear Street, that's how Jason looked within the second movie of Friday the 13th Part 2. Speaking of which, I love the kills they went for. Even though it's one kill, there's no variety, but the axe kills are pretty brutal, where you see someone's face get split into multiple pieces, people getting hacked up, and this killer actually doesn't hesitate like Jason. They actually kill campers like kids. Not to say that that's a pleasure of seeing, but I was just surprised and shocked that that was actually happening on screen. I love the score in this movie. The score in this movie is perfect. It feels exactly like a score you would want in a summer camp slasher movie. Here's my flaws with the movie though. I am not a big fan of the main character of Ziggy. She is annoying, dreadful, and I preferred if her sister was the main character. Even though some people probably aren't a fan of her, thinking she's too moody or too boring, but at least she's more likable than Ziggy, if you ask me. And another thing is that this movie was obviously made for an 80s movie. It feels very shocking it feels weird that they set it in 1978, and I think they did that to avoid the whole cliche, nostalgic thing where it's a summer camp slasher movie that's set in the 80s. I get all that, and they need to match it up with Ziggy's age from 1978 to 1994, which we'll get into. If that was necessary, you could have at least set it in 1980, 1994, and I think this movie being set in 1978 was weird, and it doesn't, when you watch this movie, it's clearly intended for a 80s movie. It's not intended for a 70s movie like they go for with this movie. Despite all those flaws, I really love this movie. The camp atmosphere, the cinematography, in the nighttime where you get hues of fog, the kills, the score, the look of the night was amazing. But with those flaws, this movie lands on my number 2 list, and it always will be. And it's not to say it's a bad thing, it's just a movie that has flaws. So, at number 2 is Fear Street Part 2, 1978. At my number 1 spot is Fear Street Part 1, 1994. I love and adore this movie. If you see my previous ranking, you know that I love the first Fear Street movie. It's an amazing movie, and I get a lot of Scream elements every time I watch it. Mostly because this movie was inspired by the Scream movies, specifically the first one. And it basically has the vibe of Scream, which I do like. Especially the way the killer looks, the Skull Mask Killer, the aka the Grim Reaper. I like the fact that the Grim Reaper killer is very similar to Ghostface's appearance and attire. They both wear white masks and they're very creepy looking, and they both wear black hooded robes. And they both kind of do this thing where every time they're stalking somebody, they kind of are hunched over in most of the scenes. And Skull Mask runs and moves exactly like Ghostface does. Again, the way he stalks people, the way he walks and runs and chases after people. And they are both extremely clumsy the way they do it too. The only difference about Skull Mask Killer and Ghostface is that Ghostface at least talks. The Skull Mask Killer doesn't, mainly because he's possessed. I love the soundtrack that this movie goes for. It really is a cool score. And the guy that actually did the score for this movie actually did the score of Scream. I like the fact that he clearly see what they were going for, but it was different to where he took elements of the score from the original Scream and basically put it in this film, but he altered a lot, unlike Halloween H2O. Speaking of the movie, I love the cinematography work that they did, where it feels like you're in a horror movie, or a slasher movie I should say, but it feels like a retro horror movie or slasher movie that they're going for, and that's essentially what it is. And speaking of that, I love the scene where the character at the beginning of the film is hiding from the Skull Mask Killer, and that scene when she's hiding in like the little mall section where it has all the masks and stuff like that, the props. I love the type of lighting that they went for. It's kind of like that purplish bluish lighting that screams retro horror, that if you ask me. And with that, this movie actually screams the 90s perfectly. I get it, screams the 90s. And it just adds more of the vibe that you were set in the 90s era. I love the storyline that this movie goes for. Again, very reminiscent of Scream, but is very different in its own way. I do enjoy most of the characters in this movie, if not most of them. I don't really like the main character of Dina. I mean, she's okay, but she's nowhere near as cool as Sydney, if you ask me. In fact, since these movies are very similar, in Scream, I like the character of Sydney pretty much in all the movies except for her appearance in Scream 6. But I don't really care about the character of Dina. She's just kind of boring to me. I would have preferred if her brother, Josh, was the main character in the movie. He's kind of like that detective guy, and he's very similar to Randy, trying to do like the detective stuff. And he's he's clearly into horror movie aficionados type thing. And he's kind of one of those horror movie aficionados experts type thing. Even though I think his obsession is mostly with true crime rather than horror movies, unlike Randy or Noah from the Scream TV show. This is an amazing popcorn-filled slaughterfest movie that is amazing, and I recommend people check out if you love 90s horror, and this movie captures that perfectly. It feels like you just went back in time, back in the 90s, where you loved and praised the horror movie era, and this movie captures that perfectly, the way the characters are interacting with each other on screen. the score, the way they set the camera work, the way that this movie is well directed and well with the cinematography. And this is a perfect movie for you if you love the 90s horror era. And that is why this movie is at my #1 spot, because it captures that perfectly, and it's an amazing treat to 90s horror movie fans. And after you watch this movie, you are going to be having a great killer day. What do you guys think of this video? Do you guys like it, hate it, thought it was okay? Or did you like the previous one that I did?